Welcome back to the Tiga Tactics Podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident MANs, martial art nerds, include co-founder of Tiga Tactics and holder of 8 different black belts, Dr. Conrad Bui.
Hello, everybody.
We also have black belt holder in 4 different styles, the other co-founder of Tiga Tactics, Patrick Vuong.
What's up, online self-defense enthusiasts?
And I'm your other co-host, active duty Army Special Forces soldier and champion obstacle course racing athlete, Evan Ultra-OCR man Perperis. Today, we're going to be talking about situational awareness. You go to like any martial arts gym or any kind of, I feel like any self-defense related thing, or reread any book about self-defense, and they're always like, all right, the most important thing is situational awareness. And they're like, all right, now that we got that out of the way, let's learn how to punch people in their throats. And you're like, wait, what? You just like, I feel like you glossed over that topic just so you could teach something you know really well. So I guess let's start at the top. What is situational awareness? And whoever wants to take that.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Situational awareness to me is like a radar system. It incorporates all of your senses, including the sense that we don't know scientifically, which is the sixth sense, or like your gut, your intuition. And all of those things are constantly transmitting information to you, and it's up to you to do something with that information to keep yourself safe. I think a lot of, like you said, Evan, a lot of self-defense instructors or martial arts instructors or shooting instructors, they just give situational awareness lip service. They're just, you got to have situational awareness, man. Are you red alert, yellow alert? All right, cool. Now let's go shoot some stuff. Like that's, it's talking about something does not mean you're actually learning about something. And I think it's really important to understand that situational awareness is a radar system that should be going on at all times. And in almost every situation that you're in, other than sleeping, because obviously when you're sleeping, you'll everything will be shut off. But if you're awake, your radar system should always be going. Obviously, and we'll probably, Connor will probably talk about this more a little bit later, but you don't want it to be so amped. You don't want to be so amped up and have it on all the time that you literally stress yourself out and have a lot of physiological side effects. But you do need to be aware of what's around you. And a lot of people only say situational awareness is watching your back, but it's a lot more than that. It's listening to cues. I've heard the term that watch your six actually doesn't refer to 6 o'clock behind you. It actually means front, right side, left side, behind you, up and down. So that's another way to look at it as well. Yeah.
I've never heard it described that way. That's interesting, and it's not a bad way to remember it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you think situation is more important than having essentially martial skill? We'll go with that question next.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Your situational awareness is the number one tool that you'll use throughout your life all the time to get you out of trouble, to prevent you from getting into trouble. It is far more important and superior than what kind of gun you have, what type of knife you're carrying, how many black belts you have, how high you.
No, you're tearing apart the podcast. But that tells you. I mean, again, you know our qualifications. You know the stuff that this group knows, and the fact that you're saying that, I think, really speaks to how important it is. Sorry, I interrupted. Keep going.
No, absolutely. I think that you and Conrad would totally agree. I'm not expecting any of you to debate this with me, considering Evan, you've been in many war zones, and Conrad, you're a true martial arts master in many different styles and have competed at many different levels. I think you guys would agree, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if your situational awareness is good, you don't even get to the fight because you've avoided the situation before it even happens, as we talked about in some of our other podcasts about pyramid of personal protection and the laws of stupid, all that stuff. You've made enough right decisions where, like, I at no point do I have to pull my gun or draw my blade or punch someone in the throat or, like it it preempts all the bad stuff essentially.
Yeah, and I think what Patrick talked about, being aware of your surroundings, and for me, it's a lifestyle. It's not that I'm turning anything on or off. It's just part of my lifestyle. Whenever I leave my house, I just try to be more aware. I try to be more alert of what's going on around me, and not just for danger. If you've taken seminars with me, I'm a civilian. I'm not looking up at the roof lines for snipers or anything like that. I want to be alert for possible dangers for sure. And also, if I'm more alert, I can also look at the beauty in life, because life is short. Life is short, and every day that we have, you'll never get that back. And if you're not paying attention to the negatives and as well as the positives, you're missing out on life as well too.
Yeah, that's always good advice. I always appreciate that you bring up the look at the beauty and things, because I'll do these obstacle course races in these like beautiful places, sometimes on the side of mountains. And I'll run for several hours and I'll finish. And people are like, "Do you see the view from the top of the mountain?" And I'm like, "No, I was staring at my feet, breathing really hard." And like, you didn't look up. So luckily, there's usually one volunteer who's like I specifically remember multiple world championships coming over a wall, and he's like, "Make sure you look up." And like you look up and you're like, oh wow, that was a good view. But yes, situational awareness important. Again, I concur with all the stuff you guys were saying, and as someone who has been to combat zones, when you come back, it takes an adjustment, right? Because you get used to whatever the normal is, and when you're downrange in Iraq, that becomes the new normal, and the threats that are present in America don't necessarily look the same in Iraq and vice versa. All right. Like, so even driving around in the States, like when most people drive by garbage on the side of the road, their immediate thought's not like, oh, there's a roadside bomb there. And that typically is my immediate thought. I definitely don't swerve out of the way or anything, but like that's the first thing that cues up in my mind. And I have to be like, nope, America, cross that out. It's probably not that. It's probably just garbage. So yeah, definitely takes some adjustment, and I think it's as someone who's again been back and forth a couple of times, it's typically worse right when you get back again, just because the new base, the normal has shifted, and then it kind of it gets better basically as the longer you're back in America type stuff. So you mentioned it earlier, Patrick. Tell people about you can cite a specific one or just talk about it in general about the color code thing.
Yeah, that's actually a misnomer of sorts, especially in the tactical world. So there's Cooper's color code. Jeff Cooper is a very famous tactical firearms pioneer, and he really established a lot of foundations in terms of how to teach firearms. He had a color code system, but that color code system is not for situational awareness. Actually, it is for your readiness to use your firearm in a dangerous situation. So somehow along the way, it got bastardized or absorbed, modified to refer to situational awareness. But that's actually not what the Cooper's color code is for. It's for your readiness to recognize danger, engage it, and use your firearm. And so a lot of guys who teach firearms or really into that whole tactical world, whether it's knives or guns, they're like, we're white, now we're yellow, no, orange, danger coming, gotta go to red, and it's like, dude, seriously, if you have to really think about those four colors, it's probably too late. And I think we should really go back to what Conrad said, is it should just be a part of your being, as a part of your lifestyle, and you're just absorbing information as you go, and that informs how you live your life so that you can avoid a lot of these things. Again, we're speaking just purely from a civilian point of view, but
Yeah.
But I think that's really important to distinguish and not get into the pseudoscience of a lot of these self-instructors get into. They think they're very scientific because they've heard these terms before, and they kind of bastardize it. They don't really understand how to make something practical. And I think that's where Tiga Tactics Combatives is different, is because we take very complex things like the physiology, biomechanics, and teach it in a way that anybody could absorb that information quickly and use it in a real life situation. So in terms of situational awareness, I like to think of it as a radar. It's just on. It's always on. It's always going. Conrad likes to think of it as just his everyday life. He's just naturally aware and stays mindful. And you start to incorporate that into your life as opposed to, you know, it's not Star Trek. It's not like, red alert, shields up. Where's the red
Yeah.
shirts? I need someone to die for me. Like, yeah, that's not how it works, bro.
Yeah, the Army doesn't use the color-coded system in their official like curriculum. The Air Force combatives, because it was developed later, actually that's actually part of their curriculum. I think I was actually on part of like the actual test for the basic instructor level certification. They teach a couple of the different, because there's like three, I don't remember them off the top of my head. There's like three different color-coded systems they teach, and they each are nuanced. It was good to learn, and it was good to like talk about that and talking about like how your body physiologically changes and you'll react under different stress environments. We don't necessarily talk about the colors like you're saying, like where you're like, I'm in the red now. The only one we talk about as instructors is we always mention going into the black, because you'll see students who are not used to high stress environments, like you're verbally giving them direct instructions, like move your hand down to the hip, move your hand down to the hip, and they're just like, I mean, just not responsive. They're just like holding on, and their eyes are like focused on one thing, and they're sweating, and their heart rate's super high. So we use going into the black a lot. We'll use that. That's the only one we use verbally that we talk about, but we don't, like you're saying, we don't talk. We don't like, oh, I'm in everyone code yellow now. It's just like, yeah, like I mean, you talk about the threats and you pay attention, and like you were saying, it's a radar. It's constantly on, and it adjusts and takes in information and adjusts your behavior as situation dictates.
Right. And I think going into black is a good thing to know and understand, because the adrenaline dump is real and all those side effects do happen. What that soldier or that person was going through is basically they've lost their sense of hearing. Basically, that's one of the physiological side effects of the adrenaline dump. But that to me is not a part of. I mean, it's a part of situational awareness, but it's a really small part of situational awareness. So to kind of teach that color system as like the all being, this is situational awareness, complete situation, that to me is, you're taking a very small part of a really important topic and making it, overemphasizing it.
Yeah. So let's talk about actual techniques you would use for situational awareness. Like what are things, we'll start off with like, it's Dr. Conrad. What are things you do that you feel like helps improve your situational awareness?
Well, probably my first thing it's more of a mindset. I recognize that it's easy to not be aware of my surroundings, to lose that mindfulness. So in knowing that, I'm more vigilant about trying to stay aware, stay alert in my daily life. Have more of that mindfulness, because there's research that shows the typical person, they're only mindful about 40 to 50% of their day. The rest of the time we're on autopilot. And the reason people speculate that we're on autopilot is because the brain uses a lot of glucose. And if we're not on autopilot, it's the brain's burning up all that glucose, and so it defaults back to going to habits and autopilot so that it conserves that glucose. So it's our natural tendency and our nature to just go on autopilot whenever we can. So yeah, just that first step can help with your mindset, knowing that I have a tendency to go on autopilot, and that's just human nature. And so if we know that, then we can be more vigilant and try to have more of that mindfulness. One thing I like to do, I have one of those smartwatches, and I set it to buzz every 20 minutes. So every hour it buzzes 3 times, and it just kind of wakes me up. And sometimes when I'm so unaware, sometimes it buzzes, I don't even notice it buzz. It passed that marker, and I'm like, I didn't even notice my watch buzz. It's because I wasn't being mindful, and so that helped me to train my mindfulness as well too. To every time it buzzes, I take 3 deep breaths, all the way in, all the way out, and your breathing is what can help connect your mind back to your body. and then I try to pay attention to two things: my outside world and my inside world. And the outside world, we talked about that. I try to pay attention to what can be potentially dangerous, and sometimes I'll use my imagination. If I'm in my house, maybe there's a fire, maybe there's an earthquake, and if there ever, I live in California, and if there's ever an earthquake, I'm more prepped for it. If there's ever a fire, I'm more prepped for it, because it's not the first time in my mind that something like that has happened. If I'm in a parking lot, I might I might think back to one of those violent videos we always talk about. Somebody's just going to rush me and start stabbing me in the back here, and that's a potential because I've seen it on video. It's kind of out there and it's kind of morbid, but if I think about those things from time to time, and if it ever happens to me, then I won't freeze. I won't be in that black, like, oh my God, what's going on? How is this even possible? What is this? Yeah, and so I'm more, I can deal with it more quickly. And of course, I also try to look for what's beautiful outside. So I try to figure out what's going on outside of me. I also try to figure out what's going on inside of me too. And so sometimes, with those 3 deep breaths, what I'll do is I'll try to feel my pulse. And when I feel my pulse, that really helps me to be inside my body. When you feel your pulse, that does something for you. That really makes you feel like, wow, I'm still alive. This blood is flowing through my veins. It really brings you into your body. And being able to feel what's going on inside your body, one, is good for your health. Like, oh my goodness, my stomach doesn't feel good, or my knees hurting, or what's going on here. Also, like what Patrick talked about, that sixth sense. If you're able to be in touch with your thoughts, your feelings, you'll be more likely to pay attention to those gut feelings. There are times where I totally ignored the gut feelings. I kind of had a feeling, but I totally ignored it. And yeah, something turned out bad. And so I wish I was more aware and alert of those things too. So trying to pay attention to what's outside of you, and like what Patrick said, using all your senses, sense of smell, sense of touch, and even the sense of the weight, your proprioception, the sense of where you are in motion, the weight on your heels, or if you're sitting, the weight on your hips. It's a lot. It's a lot. So it's a constant exercise. It's constant training. Someone once said something like, how do you get mindful? How do you do that? And I told them, you don't become mindful, you practice mindfulness. You're never enlightened. You can practice more awakening to be more awake, more alert, but you're never really truly in that state forever. It's like being healthy or being fit. You just have to constantly practice it to stay fit.
Yeah, I really like the what if game. I do that a lot. One, I just think it's like a mentally engaging, interesting activity. And you mentioned that thing about like walking through the parking lot. Again, not to like we were talking about, it varies, right? So like I don't walk every time I walk past someone. I'm not like, well, what if this person punches me? Like it varies based off of threat, based off environment, based off all the things we talked about in the Laws of Stupid episode. So actually at the martial arts class I was at the night of this recording, we had a like emotionally disturbed person outside like screaming at our window of the martial arts gym. So it was like and they weren't near the door, but I mean the door was 15 feet away, right? So all they did was walk 15 feet over and pull the door. And right, so I was like one eye's on the instructor, one eye staring at this crazy woman, and I'm running through the what if and like what tools am I going to use if like she charges in and this gets violent or whatever, and kind of heightened alert. But then she finished yelling at the window and wandered off after she was there for a while. I don't know, probably like 15 minutes. It was a while. It was like a good chunk of the class. But it was during Kali class, so like barging in with a bunch of people holding sticks already, like but obviously her mental state was not there, and she looked like she was on drugs, but
Wow.
it would not have been the best decision. So
You mentioned like, oh, I'm not gonna think this guy walking by will punch me in the face. I do think that sometimes, like, oh, walk by. What if this person just punched me in the face? I'm weird. I'm weird, but at the same time, I'm also peace loving and looking at the beauty of things too.
yeah, there's actually another podcast topic in there that I do want to discuss at some point because I had a discussion at work the other day. If one of the guys who wanted, he's like, yeah, I'd come to the train to the combatives gym, but I'm a pacifist, so I don't fight. And I was like, I think he's just making excuses. But no, I do want to dive in on like, can you be a pacifist and still be a martial artist on a future episode? So
That would be interesting. Yes.
yeah, but we'll talk about that later. And you mentioned there's if anyone's read The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, highly recommend that book. And talking about that gut feeling, a lot of times that gut feeling is people essentially seeing things that are wrong, and then their like conscious mind is like no, waving it away, be like no, that's
Hmm.
nothing big deal. Like, and that's what the gut feeling a lot of times comes from, because you see something that's out of place or maybe something that's missing, right? So it's a deviation from your baseline. It's something that should be there that's not there, or something that is there that shouldn't be there. And it's kind of setting off these little warning bells, and then you kind of like because most of your life is peaceful and most of your life is thankfully non-violent, you kind of ignore them, and then it ends up, something bad happens, and then when you look back in hindsight, you're like, oh, that was a warning sign, that was a
Right.
warning sign, that was a warning sign. Um, so
Yeah.
Patrick, let's jump over to you. Feel free to follow up that or share some other techniques you use.
Yeah. I want to kind of piggyback off of that because we've all been training martial arts for a really long time. I've been training since 1995. So situational awareness is something that's always top of mind for me, but I didn't really know how to verbalize it in the way that my brain and my body uses it until I met a gentleman by the name of Yusuf Badu, and he's a former,
Oh, he's good. Yeah,
yeah,
I
he's a
listen to a lot of his
former
stuff.
Marine Corps soldier, or I shouldn't say soldier. He's a Marine. Former. No, wait. How do they say it? They never say ex-Marine. They say
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's a Marine, and
Don't get me
he
started on their propaganda.
right.
That could be another episode.
Right.
I
But
love my Marine brothers.
he
Yeah.
was he was an instructor in their hunter killer program, which not to go too deep into this, but basically they they track and hunt down specific people and and take them out basically. So there was one time when they had to figure out how to hunt down this sniper. um so he's got a lot of real world experience anyway. I don't want to get too far into his history, but he was a big influence on me and how to explain situational awareness. And one of the things that he taught in the hunter kill program is the acronym BAD, BAD. So B is baseline, A is anomaly, and D is the decision you have to make. So kind of piggybacking off what you said, Evan, was there's a norm that in society everybody accepts it. Let's say we're going to a Starbucks. Um, we know what it smells like. We know what it sounds like. We know what we're going to order. The counters are almost always set up the same. But if you walked in and all of a sudden there was an elephant there, that's the anomaly. You'd have to make a decision saying, is this normal for a Starbucks or should I get the hell out of here? Right. So most people in that situation would probably get out of there because that's a really extreme situation. But what if instead it's the woman in front of your dojo there, right? It's a woman and she looks kind of disheveled. She's inside the Starbucks and she's screaming. And a lot of people actually freeze, right? The red lights are going off, the alarms are going off, but they kind of freeze because they're like, wait, is this real? Right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of the stories that I researched and the videos that I watch and the news reports that I read afterward, they say I couldn't believe it. It was like I was in a
Yeah.
movie,
Yeah.
and those are all basically symptoms of not having enough situational awareness training. They just couldn't conceive of something like this happening. And so they often freeze, or they like you said, they use their logic, their brain to kind of like make an excuse for it.
Yeah. Justify someone else's bad behavior. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so it's really important to, as Conrad said, trust your gut instinct and do something about as quickly as possible. Because we don't want to get to the point where someone is stabbing us unexpectedly, you know. And so how do you do that, right? And so one of the things that I got taught actually by my uncle Conrad and my uncle Uncle Vincent. He's a former Navy SEAL in the South Vietnamese military, and when he moved to Canada, he became a driving instructor. But he didn't really change his style too much. So he would scream at me when he was teaching me. And he would ask me stuff like, so there were three car lengths back. There was a vehicle. What kind of vehicle was it? And I'd be like, what? I don't know. He's like, you die, man, you die. And I was like, oh my God, he's screaming at me. I'm gonna die. I don't know. Like, he's super intense, but it taught me very quickly to always be aware. And in a driving situation, you've got to use your mirrors. And he taught me, every 3 seconds, move your eyes, look at something different, look at the side mirror, look at the rear view mirror, look in front of you, look 5 car lengths in front of you, look behind you. And that really transformed my understanding of what situational awareness is, because he's such an intense man. He would literally scream at me, you die, man, you die.
And is he teaching you like defensive like driving, or is he teaching you like basic like driver's ed? Is this basic driver's ed, or is this like an actual tactical course here?
No, this is basic driver's ed. I'm 15
That's
years old.
hysterical.
I'm 15 years old. I'm about to turn 16. I'm ready to drive. And he's screaming at me, you die, man, you die.
You're like, I can't even change the radio and drive at the same time. And you want me to know what 5 car lengths back is?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's too much. That's
Yeah.
too much. Yeah, I've been to a couple of courses that have counter surveillance portions, and there's a lot of checking of the rearview mirror and stuff like that. And similar to the Iraq stuff, a lot of that's hard to turn off.
Mhm.
So like I feel like after going to those courses, my brain has been permanently altered to pay attention to a lot, especially when I'm driving. A lot of stuff that it's probably it's probably overkill. I'm probably paying attention to more than I necessarily need to from that. But yeah, consequence of the job, I guess. And we mentioned some of the baseline stuff about Starbucks. The big one they always talk about in Iraq is like when there's a roadside bomb, a lot of times you won't see women or children or families essentially outside, because everyone in the town or anyone in that street knows the bomb is there, so they are purposely not going outside. So that's usually one of the warning signs if the bomb's there in kind of daylight. But different situations, different types of bombs, different there's a lot of factors. It's never quite that easy. Maybe it's on one street, but you're on an adjacent street, and then you make a turn onto that street, and by the time you realize there's no one there, it's too late. Stuff like that. So, sometimes easier said than done. But the fact that they were like guys like Yusuf Badu and another book that talks about a lot, Left of Bang, a lot of that stuff. The fact that we were actually incorporated that into pre-deployment training for Iraq and Afghanistan it was good. It's what should have been happening. Probably could have used a little more of it, but it's hard when you're getting ready for deployment. There's just so much stuff to do to get over there. So, yeah.
And
go for it,
I
Conrad.
just want to mention that whole word situational awareness, starts with the situation. Like, where are you? Being able to just recognize, where are you? What are you doing? If you're driving, is there a potential for danger? There's always a potential for danger when you're driving. If you're walking, is there a potential for danger? There's always a potential for danger when you're walking. So also, of course, it would depend on your profession as well too, not just your location or your situation. A different profession. If you're law enforcement or military, you definitely need to be more aware of than just regularly hanging out and things like that as well too. But I think having a background in military law enforcement, I was a bouncer, and when I was on the job, I was very vigilant about looking at people's waistline and things like that, seeing if they have a weapon or whatever, and just every person walking into the bar was a potential problem. So having those kind of professions, like what you said, Evan, really changes the way you live.
Yeah. And I know we talked about on the Laws of Stupidest episode, I feel like we talked a lot about situational awareness stuff, especially when we were talking about cell phones. Such a big situational awareness killer in the 2020s. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you walk down the street or you walk into any sort of place where people are not actively doing something, and most of them are staring at their phone.
Right.
They couldn't tell you anything about their environment. So
Yeah,
let's
such a big hindrance nowadays. People text while they drive too. It's ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about, so we kind of covered a little bit of using the personal pyramid of personal protection model, right? We talked about a little bit about mindset. We talked a little bit about skill set kind of for situational awareness. What about tool set? Are there any tools that we use that you can think of that help increase situational awareness? I'll kind of open it up for that, open it up for discussion. We'll jump it over to whoever wants to jump in at this point.
I would
Okay,
say
I didn't. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
I would say that in terms of tools, there's there's mental tools and things like that. But I would say a actual physical tool would be a flashlight. During the day, it may
Good
not
one.
help so much, but at night, it's a game changer, especially if you got a flashlight that has 500 or more lumens. It can brighten up your environment so that you're not second guessing, if there's someone in the bush over there, or is that a person or is just a trash bag? So that definitely helps. It makes me feel more confident when I'm walking around at night.
Such a great
And
tool
what?
too, because you can shine it on someone and not right. Like it's not like a gun or a
Mhm.
stun gun where like I'm physically hurting the person. Like all you're doing is illuminating the situation.
Right.
And if you accidentally illuminate your neighbor's dog or your neighbor's kid, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Unlike all the other tools,
Right.
right? I'm not gonna go down that route, but yeah,
Yeah.
Conrad.
Yeah, I think any tool that you want to use, whether that's a flashlight, a pan, all the way up to blades and firearms, uh, or even as simple as those personal alarms. Some people really poo-poo those personal alarms. Uh, for me, I think it reminds people, and the primary thing for me, anyways, is that it reminds you that this is not a safe world sometimes, and just knowing that will help you to be more alert.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah.
It's kind of like a talisman or a mnemonic device to remind you to stay alert.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what else do we got for situational awareness that we haven't talked about?
I would say one of the things that I like to explain when I'm teaching, well, back in the day we call it women's self-defense, but now there's kind of a movement to not call it that and just call it personal protection, and the students just happen to be women. But anyway, semantics aside, one of the things that I emphasized was that uh, situational awareness, like the time gap between you analyzing your environment and your situation and then deciding to take action, that time gap should shrink the more you do this on a regular everyday basis. um, I use the example: you get to your car, you look at your tires to make sure they're not flat, you look at the windows to make sure they're not broken, you look inside to make sure no one's in there waiting to kidnap you. Now when I do that for myself, it takes me literally maybe 3 seconds. It's really, really short. But when I'm teaching this, it may actually take the students a little bit longer because they've never done it in their life before. Like they just literally walk to their car, get in and drive off. They don't even think of these things. So as you practice these tips, the timeline gets shorter, and that's the ideal, so that it's no longer a conscious thought. It's just, as Conrad said, just a part of his life. He's doing these things almost automatically. Of course, he has to remind himself first, stay mindful, and then boom, everything becomes kind of automatic once he does that. I think some of my beginner students who were kind of like, really? You're that paranoid? You check all those things? And I say, yes, I literally check all those things. But it doesn't take me that long. It's not like I'm standing there for 30 seconds, or a minute looking at all these different potential problems. It becomes automatic over time.
Right. And like what I mentioned earlier, that our minds want to go on autopilot. So if we can make that a habit, in fact, it can go on autopilot and you just do it naturally. I know, like when I'm with you or with other like citizens or people that are aware of their defensive mindset, and we're going to go eat, we're all jockeying for the same position to look outside, and I'm like, okay, fine, you can have it, but it's just habit for us.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, but and my wife actually points it out sometimes, even like we'll walk in and she'll be like she'll let me go because she knows where I'm gonna sit. And
Yes.
like I've never specifically even said it to her. She's just been around me so much. That's just where I sit when I go into restaurants. It's just like, oh, that's where you're obviously sitting there. Yeah.
Yep. And
Yeah,
and
so
that's good.
things
I
that,
think it's important that everybody in your unit, so to speak, whether it's your wife, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, everybody kind of understands each other's role. So these things don't need to be I mean, hopefully you have an emergency plan. You've kind of talked it through and kind of rehearsed it, but it's good that your wife knows that you have a role to play and that she allows you to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we talked about it, it's like, oh, you're too paranoid. It's like, well, again, like it becomes, I know I've used this analogy before. It becomes like the safety precautions on my car, right? Like I have a seatbelt, I have an airbag, my car's been like safety rated, like I have a flat tire kit, I have all this stuff, so I don't have to worry about it every time. Like I there are redundancies built into the plan besides like the initial check, but then there's redundancies built into the plan to make sure that even if something does go wrong, I have other ways to deal with the problem, and I've thought through them before. So when something does go wrong, I don't get all panicky. It's like, oh, this happened. Well, that sucks. Let's go to plan A. Oh, that's not going to work. Let's go to plan B. Oh, that's not going to work. Plan C, So, yeah.
another one more tip I have for our listeners. Uh, Anytime you walk in through a door that there's glass, or there's a big glass entryway, or even just a big glass entrance, look through that glass first and assess the surroundings before you walk through that door. Especially you want to look for where money's exchanged, cash register or bank teller, things like that. Just a quick glance before you open up that door and go on in, because something could be happening inside there that you might not want to be involved in. So that's a habit that I've made. Just anytime there's something I can look through, I want to look through it first before I enter through.
Yeah. And again, I know we kind of we did deep dive that pretty good in the Laws of Stupid episode. So
Right.
anyone who's listened to this one that has not listened to that one, I would definitely jump back and give that one a listen as well.
Yeah, I've two last points before we go. Number one is just to kind of piggyback off of what you both said, is the I have the rule of 4 E's, which I mentioned before in that episode, but also in some of our programs, online courses, is the 4 E's. So when you go into a new environment, you want to look, obviously, as Conrad said, look at the entrance and look through the entrance. Once you're inside, you want to look for other exits, in case there's a fire or emergency, earthquake, what have you, or the entrance that you just went through gets clogged up with people stampeding. You always want to look for other alternatives. The third E is enemies, potential enemies, obviously, robbers and things and people like that. And then the fourth one, a lot of people don't think about, is fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers are obviously very important in case of fire. The fire is more likely to happen than you being attacked by some maniac. So an extinguisher is really good to have in your home, but also good to look for when you're in public, and not just for the fire, but also if something violent does happen, you then have a projectile. That fire retardant can be shot at, can be shot out of your extinguisher. Basically, you have a certain range depending on the size of it. But then once you've you shot the extinguisher out, you can use it as a blunt instrument because it's made out of metal or aluminum, and hitting somebody over the head with that would would not be good for the bad guy. So the 4 E's: entrances, exits, enemies, and extinguishers. So and then one last story before I leave it at that is, I was walking on my old alma mater, Cal State Fullerton. I was teaching a martial arts class there, and my sister-in-law was across the quad, probably 75, 100 feet away. And then later I met up with her, and she's like, "Oh, you don't have any situational awareness. You didn't see me." And then I kind of laughed because I had to explain to her, like, that's true. I did not see her, but I was more concerned with the people within, like, say, 30 yards of me, not like 100 yards away from me. Unless she was a sniper, then maybe I have to be more aware, but I'm not in a war zone. So I'm not going to be looking 100 yards away. I'm going to be looking at my immediate zone. And so when I talk about radar, I that's how I kind of use my situational awareness. Is it kind of goes outward in circles, and so I'm looking at the people closest to me, see if they're a threat. Then it's the people a little bit further away until finally we get to those outer rings, and then that's kind of the priority, because it doesn't matter if a bad guy's 100 yards away from me if his buddy's right in front of me stabbing me. So,
Yeah.
just a little note on
that
that.
lines up again, talking about free deployment training for military. We do something called 5s and 25s. So they talk about when you anytime you stop your vehicle, you look at, like, the immediately 5, I can't remember if it's 5 meters or 5 feet. You look around like 5 feet, 5 meters, whatever. Right, you basically look right around your vehicle because you want to make sure, as dumb as it sounds, like, you want to make sure you didn't park on the IED. Right, that's generally not a good day. Right, so you check immediate surroundings, and then from there you shoot out to more like 25 meters and kind of look a little bit further out. You again, and we use that phrase in the military all the time. Worried about my people will be talking about non-shooting stuff or non-self-defense stuff, and they'll be like, "Yeah, worried about my 50-meter target," because when you qualify for the military, the closest target is 50 meters for a rifle, and the farthest target is 300 meters. And there's targets in between. So whenever you hear someone say, "Or is it 25 meters?" It's been a hot minute since I've been at the range for the military. People always say, like, worried about my 50-meter target, meaning, like, I'm worried about the immediate threat or the immediate task at hand, finishing a report, whatever it may be, if it's not actual combat related. And then I kind of work my way out from there. Again, taking care of the nearest threat first and the most likely threat. And you mentioned the 4 E's game. Great tip. It's also something, if anyone has kids, you can play similar games with kids without making them, like, scared about the situation, right? You can use it as, like, I Spy. Me and my kids play I Spy with My Little Eye type game. So you can essentially do the same thing, but link it to security stuff without necessarily telling them that's what you're doing. Right. So you can even just do I Spy with My Little Eye and just pick something red, which is the exit sign or the fire extinguisher, right? And that's they immediately get one. Or I Spy with My Little Eye something, silver or black, which will be the exit door or something like that, right? So again, it's cueing the kids to look around for stuff without being like, "Hey kids, we're deep in the war zone. You gotta, I need you to low crawl to the door," making them all, because sometimes kids will get more worried, because they look at their parents, they look at their adults to see how they're reacting, and they'll behave similarly, right? So they take a lot of their cues from their parents. This morning I just watched a video of little kids playing with giant snakes, and they're like, "Yeah, as long as we don't have the parents here that showed, like, the scary reaction, they're like, the babies are fine, like, they have no problems touching the snakes and stuff like that."
Wow.
But if the parents are there and they're, like, freaking out, then the kid starts crying because they're taking their cues from the parents.
Right.
So yeah,
good point.
all right, final shout outs, thoughts, wrap ups, anything else we need to plug? We'll jump over to Conrad first.
Thanks for listening, and I think this is the foundation of our personal protection lifestyle here.
Yeah, good stuff. Any final plugs, shout outs you want me to give as well, Conrad?
Mm, I'm sure Patrick will handle
We'll
all
bump it
that.
over to Patrick. Patrick,
Patrick.
final thoughts on situational awareness, and then any plugs, sponsors, recommendations, etc.
Yeah, my final thoughts, situational awareness is important. Also, but we didn't get into it, but positional awareness, though, to me goes hand in hand. So
Mm.
maybe in a future podcast we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, just make it part of your everyday life so that it becomes almost automatic and you don't really have to be too paranoid about it. In terms of future events, we've got a webinar coming up. It's going to be most likely in July, possibly August. It's going to be led by a special guest host, special guest instructor. That's
Another special guest. Oh man.
yes. And it just
Woohoo!
happens to be you, Evan.
Again. Three
All
in a
right.
row.
Yeah. So Evan, why don't you tell us real quick what the topic will be?
So the topic is going to be essentially physical fitness and peaking performance for martial arts. So more concept based and less like, hey, do this amount of leg races, run this amount of miles. It's more of like here, and not surprisingly, just like all of Tiga tactic stuff, it's taught in like series of threes. Like, all right, here are the three things you need to focus on to be good at fitness. And then within those three, there's essentially like three of each of those. And here are some principles you can apply. So it doesn't matter what style of martial arts you're competing in, or if you're not competing at all, you just want to kind of stay healthy, but you are competitive enough to improve. Like even if you just want to be the best guy or girl in your gym, so these will give you some tips. I think a lot of martial artists sometimes will be like, well, I don't need to be fit because I know how to do martial arts. And it's like, well, you need to do both. There's a reason the UFC has weight classes, right? There's a there's a reason basically all combat sports are broken into weight classes,
Yes.
and male and female, right? So there's those things are important. Strength is important. Cardiovascular ability, that I know we talked about that a little bit, that on the Muay Thai episode. That's important. So some general good recommendations you can take and not only apply to martial arts, but then as you, right, let's say you do martial arts for another 5 years and then you get bored and you want to go into marathon running or triathlons or whatever you may do. A lot of the principles you can literally cut and paste and bring them right over and plop them down in your new sport. And as long as you're following those principles, you'll find decent amount of success in there. So
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I can't wait.
It's going to be exciting. And just a quick, not to drag this on anymore, but we used to have a joke in Kempo Karate is the bigger the stomach, the more ki they had.
yeah, I've heard that. I've heard
Yeah.
that too.
And it's sad because all these quote unquote grandmasters, and they're humongous. It's like, really, if you were in a fight tomorrow, do you really think that they would do well against a 20-year-old criminal who jumps them out of nowhere? You could have 10 stripes on your black belt. I don't care. If you've got a massive beer belly and you can't even climb the stairs without breathing hard, you're going to be in trouble in a physical fight. So I'm excited for this one. I think it's a really good, I think the way that you explain things fits in great with Tiga
Mhm.
Tex Combatives because it's about being practical and I'm excited for it. So the other event we have coming up is Dragon Fest Expo. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's one of the biggest martial arts conventions on the West Coast. There's going to be movie stars there, martial artists, all kinds of different practitioners from different arts. Tiga Tactics will be there with a table. We'll be exhibiting. So if you guys can join us, that's I believe August 3rd. It's the first Saturday of August. If you guys are in the LA area, please join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to hang out and meet a lot of cool people. And then in October, we have another seminar in person at Rounders MMA Fullerton in Southern California. It's going to be another excellent seminar. So if you're looking for like a fall autumn vacation, and you don't live in Southern California, come out to Fullerton with me and Conrad and train with us, and then go to Disneyland or Universal Studios afterward. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then the last thing is that we have another online course coming out pretty soon. I'm not going to say exactly what the topic is yet, but you can expect that in the coming months. And I think a lot of people will like it because it involves some very practical techniques with a very practical tool.
Yeah. I was actually before months ago, or maybe years ago, I was actually looking specifically for the course you're about to launch. So
Cool.
I am excited. And I always like hearing your input on things. I was curious. I remember when you guys announced the firearm defense course, I was like, well, what's this gonna look like? And like, yeah, just like I was like, I know it's gonna be well thought out because I know Patrick and Conrad. I was like, but there's just it I was just curious where it was gonna go. Because how do you defend against the gun? And I think your solution's actually really good. I was someone just shared a video of someone else doing a gun defense in like one of the group chats I'm in with martial arts, and I was like, I don't know. They're not using the protect system of the, protect, reposition, go on the offense. I was like, you might be fast enough. I was like, but I don't know. I feel like I like when I look at the two techniques, what you guys teach and what's on the online course and what was on this video, I was like, I think I would bet if I'm betting my life, which is exactly what I'm doing. I was like, I think I'm gonna go with the Tiga tactics method. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys are listening and you're interested in that, it's called the pistol defense course, and I'm sure there'll be a link in the show notes.
Yeah. Also, anyone who's looking for more resources, books about situational awareness, again, we plugged a couple of them. Again, The Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker, that would be my number one recommendation personally. There's also Left to Bang, which we talked about. There is another one that's not necessarily martial arts focused, but talks about processing large amounts of information in a very short period of time. It's called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. I tend to like a lot of his books. I think they're very well thought out and provide interesting input. And then I always generally recommend When Violence is the Answer by Tim Larkin. I just think that's a little less situational awareness focus, but it does talk about real world violence, and I think that's a good read for anyone who's looking to expand their knowledge. Speaking of books, one, I do have a Tiga Tactics Runner's Self-Defense Guide coming out at some point, probably July, August timeframe. Not sure. I gotta fine-tune that a little bit more. And then also, I'm going to plug one of my friends' books. So one of my friends just wrote his first book. It's called Keep Rolling. It's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu book. It's on Amazon. If anyone wants to hear from him, his name's Major John Jordan. He's an aviation pilot, and he's my replacement, taking over 1st Infantry Division Combatives. Also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and I think he's got one in a striking art too. I think it's I can't remember off the top of my head, but also a combatives guy. So really good book. Keep Rolling, available on Amazon. It's kind of a mix of funny / advice, so it's pretty good. And there's also a chapter, probably my favorite chapters, that talks about samurai and like how people use that term a lot and don't necessarily understand like any of the nuance behind it. They just heard it. It sounds cool, and they're like, I'm a samurai, I'm a Ronin, and it's like maybe you should research them that a little bit more before you start aligning yourself with certain historical groups.
Right.
So it's a really good chapter. Yeah.
I'm a ninja.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you check those out. Again, I will drop as many of these links as I can remember down in the show notes below. All right, we're gonna get going. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.